As with every year at the British Militaria Forum Alberta shoot, there are some special attendees in the form of both people and firearms. It's always nice to be able to hear the stories behind some of these less common examples. Here, we'll examine a few. I thought you might be able to comment a little bit about this.
Oh, this? Well, when you're bored and you have a lot of time and an interest in muskets, this is what happens.
What would that be, Brett?
But this is my book, Destroying Angel. It's off of a quote from William Howard Russell. He was the Times correspondent during the Crimean War, and he described the Minié rifles in the hands of British troops as the Destroying Angel, so hence the title. But this is an argument that the rifled musket was the first modern infantry weapon. So I examined the rifle's impact in the Crimean War, particularly at Balaclava, in Inkerman, Sevastopol, and also in the Indian Mutiny of '57 and the American Civil War, and a couple other places. But generally I argue that whenever the soldiers were trained up to their weapons, the rifled musket performed exceptionally well. It did cleft the enemy like the Destroying Angel, and it ushered in the modern era where soldiers engage their targets with individual weapons that are accurate out to a distance. So it raised the status of the soldier from a robot contributing one ball into a mass volley into a trained professional who engages his own targets, estimates his own range, and operates with a degree of independence on the battlefield, much like a modern soldier. So I argue, maybe somewhat controversially, that this weapon, the Minié rifle, the rifled musket, started that paradigm shift in history, and we're still living in the era that this kicked off.
And obviously a lot of work and time put into it. Where do people get this book from?
There's a place called the Amazon, I understand, where it is to be found.
And just by going to Amazon, searching for Brett Gibbons, the Destroying Angel, they'll come to it?
And yeah, you can find it there.
Right. I also understand, by being an author now, is that you also have provide a service to those that are so interested about making cartridges of various types, whether they be live or dummy. Care to maybe enlighten us on some of the details?
The website's papercartridges.com, and I recreate as close to the originals as I possibly can. The original bullets and cartridges used in these rifles. So, like the Minié bullet, the Pritchett bullets in its various forms, and the Burton bullet, which was used in the American Civil War, that every American soldier called the mini ball. But generally the black powder muzzle loading rifle musket era cartridges and bullets that I reproduce.
And you say that's at papercartridges.com?
Papercartridges.com.
Right, excellent. Any sort of minimum or maximum order that you're willing or not willing to fulfill?
No, there's options on the site. You just click and hit the drop-down list. Very large orders will take a lot longer because I'm just one guy and I can only pour lead so fast.
So we have the old world in the P51 mini rifle, meaning the new world in e-commerce.
Yes.
Right. Thank you very much, Brett. Fantastic look at both your new rifle as well as your book. I would strongly encourage all people watching here today that, well, if you can't get your hands on a P51, like Brett has been fortunate to do, then definitely get his book and have a read. It's a fantastic piece of literature and well-researched, well-referenced. And for those of you who are interested in the historical application of sort of mid-19th century black powder military weapons, it's one of the books to read. Thanks very much, Brett.
Okay, thank you, Rob.
So, Brett, I understand you brought something, well, rather distinctive and special today. What might that be?
I brought the pattern 1851 Minié rifle, which was the Destroying Angel of the Crimean War, the first commonly issued rifle ever used in battle, and it left its mark on military history from Balaclava to Inkerman and Sevastopol. Kind of old and obsolete to us today, but this is a rifle. This is what you could consider a modern infantry weapon, because you can reach out and engage individual targets up to 900 yards, which in 1854-55 is as remarkable as it is today.
Do you want to maybe walk us through some of the defining features of the P51?
Sure.
We can go sort of from the muzzle to the butt, as
Yeah,
it were.
the muzzle is the best part of it. 4-groove rifling, and it's in 702 caliber. That was because the Duke of Wellington insisted that in a pinch it should be able to fire the round ball used by Brown Bess. So to ease logistical difficulties, and in practice that was never done. It has the level catch for the bayonet. And of course there are no bands.
So what is the barrel held on with?
It is the same wedges and pins as the old Brown Bess. And it even looks like a P42 externally.
Right, and the P42 would have been the weapon of the infantry sort of immediately prior to this then?
Absolutely, yes. But no sights.
Which are pretty distinctive on their own.
Right. And these are graduated out to 900 yards.
So there's I'm noticing at the back there appears to be sort of like a battle sight.
Right, this is your 100 yards.
100 yards, okay. And then it's graduated in 100-yard increments?
2 and then 3 to 9 on up the ladder.
Okay. It's quite tall for... It sort of speaks to the trajectory and the velocity
it's
that the boat will be
considerable
traveling at.
rainbow-like arc.
Right.
And the P42 lock scarcely changed.
So that's...
And I love the little artistic features they put. They took the time to knurl the top of the hammer back that you won't find after the second model P53.
Right, just,
they just made
unnecessary
a little bit of
ornament.
artistic craftsmanship.
Right. And I'm looking at and seeing brass furniture throughout.
Right.
Right.
As was typical. And I wish it had a rack number. I'd like to be able to find the story that this could tell if it could.
Right. And I also noticed when you flipped it over there, underneath the ramrod is held in place by pipes.
Right, just like the old smooth bores.
Smooth bore. So
And this one is incredibly hard to get out, probably because it hasn't been run in and out a few times in maybe 100 years.
right. Well, the rifle looks in fantastic condition. I bet you're a proud owner, I imagine.
Yes, and I'm hoping it doesn't explode on me because I have never fired it.
No, it won't explode. Not at this shoot. That's fantastic. So I understand, of course, you've made ammunition and you've brought it with you today.
Yes. And the cartridges are by modern, or even by the P53 standards, just absolutely enormous.
It is. That's like, well,
It's about a
700
something
caliber.
grain, 702. The bullets are 690. And later they would even reduce that down to 675, and they went back to a wooden club, like the later P53 infield bullets.
Right.
But the ones they had in Crimea were 690 bullets out of a 702 bore, which with the paper leaves very little windage.
Right. And in construction, though, in terms of the way they're manufactured, fairly similar to the later P53 style cartridge.
Yes.
And the same functioning.
Exactly the same functioning.
Right.
Still has the powder cylinder in case, and the excess is twisted and stuffed up into the base of the ball.
So that much like the first pattern infield cartridges, there's no tie at the back.
There's no
It's
tie.
It's
no.
just stiff,
Right.
stuffed up there. Okay. And now, the 69 caliber bullets you're using, where do you come by those?
Oh, I had a mold made
Okay.
by Stephen Gale Brooks in Montana.
Right.
They do all my crazy projects. And the block on that thing is huge.
Just massive,
And
eh?
when you're pouring, the lead pot just goes down and down and down very fast.
Because you say they 700 odd?
700 odd grain. And they have the... Historically, they had iron cups. Now, this was the invention of Minié himself. So this is a Minié bullet. Minié bullet.
Now,
They had iron cups. They are impossible to find now, so I use brass.
just to compare as well. And so the purpose of the, well, in your case, brass, because of sort of expediency in the modern era, But the purpose of that cup was to do what?
It helps instantly expand the ball while it's still essentially at the chamber.
Right.
And it was an inadequate system. It was replaced in short order by the wooden and then later clay plugs.
Okay.
And the iron cups had a tendency of blowing through the bullet and
Right.
leaving a nasty ring in your barrel.
Ooh.
And they rarely were driven forward on firing straight. They're often found recovered, driven forward at an angle. So you didn't get good consistency
Right.
out of
Now,
it.
is that perhaps because of the rounded sort of profile of
Yes.
the bullet, or the not bullet, the plug? Right. Can you comment on some of the ranges that were used? This, of course, shoot being have a Crimea theme, that number of engagements. This was the rifle that figures prominently up till the very end of the Crimean War. When it's replaced in part, I guess, by the P-53. But for all the most famous battles, like the Alma and Inkerman and Balaclava, this is the rifle that that figures prominently in all the literature and the accounts of the battle and its effectiveness in particular. The sort of rate of fire and the way that the rifle would have been used, fairly comparable to the old sort of smoothbore, sort of 3 rounds a minute.
Of course, the difference being the range at Balaclava with the Thin Red Line, the 93rd Highlanders, their first volley was at 600 yards.
Right.
So impossible to do only a few years before with smoothbores.
Sure.
And Lieutenant Godfrey, engaging Russian artillery at Balaclava, is also firing at about 600 yards.
Right.
And many examples in the literature of sharpshooting in Sevastopol. There were riflemen with P-51s smashing the windows of the barracks in Sevastopol 900 to 1,000 yards away, which only a couple years before, impossible.
Well, that would have been the preserve of like heavy artillery.
Right.
That kind of range, eh?
Small arms,
Yeah.
infantry small arms, engaging targets at that range it turned battle upside down.
Sure. Now, I know that, well, Brett, you've written a very good book featuring this particular rifle and its effect on sort of warfare in general. I know there's a few very interesting instances in that book that you relate to some of the anecdotes that you've just mentioned about the engagement of the artillery at Balaclava, which is little, if at all, known, except by good research and finding out those accounts. And hopefully later today we'll be able, or maybe this weekend, we'll be able to put some of those not theories, but those anecdotes and the information within them to practice.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And be able to, well, snipe those cannon embrasures at Sevastopol. Well, okay, it's not quite 600 yards, but we're going to do our best. Thanks, Brett. Appreciate it, and look forward to. I guess you're going to do a bit of a demonstration for us.
Yes.
Maybe fire a couple of rounds.
Yes, the first ones I've ever fired at.
And that in particular is very interesting. The first ever out of your P-51. So this is, I imagine, a project that's been a long time interest and a long time coming, and finally come to fruition.
Yes, many years building up not only the knowledge but my bank account.
Right. Yes, because P-51s aren't exactly one, a dime a dozen, and two, you don't come across them that often. Not because they were never issued to the Army in general. That is my understanding.
No, they made fewer than 30,000.
Right.
And they're even scarcer because during the American Civil War, the Confederates were in desperate need of weapons, and they were just being stored at the Tower of London outside, by the way, in the weather.
Wow.
And the Confederates came and said, "What are you doing with those rifles?" And the British said, "Well, here you go."
Wow.
And
So there is instances of the use of the P-51 in North America
yes,
during the American Civil War.
absolutely. In fact, the majority of them were bought by the Confederates. They called them rifle brown Besses.
Ah,
But more than 18,000 out of the less than 30,000 made
wow.
were imported during the war and quickly abandoned as better weapons became available.
Sure. So very much the rifle of the Crimea, which fits perfectly with the theme of this year's shoot. And well, let's see how it does, and
right,
we can document the unbridled enthusiasm and excitement as you finally get to put a round on it. Okay.
Let's do it.
Okay, Martin. Let's show us
Okay.
what do you have in this box?
Well, I thought, seeing as Richard was a little bit disappointed after losing the Snyder shoot in 2018, that I thought it was the least I could do to supply something that would assist him in this year's shoot. So I brought him something a little bit special. We have a Snyder carbine. I think should kind of do the job.
Okay, we have the gun. Who's got the elephant? Look at this. Who has a Snyder handy?
Oh, yeah. Snyder? Yeah.
We have to get a comparison.
Was that new build?
The camera just do it
Built,
justice.
but not by me. Yeah. So it's a 7.55 Snyder.
7.55 Snyder. Hold that tag out again.
It's almost comparable to a protection cap.
And it's 900 grains with 190 grains of powder.
And who's going to shoot that?
Well, Richard is
Richard.
for the Snyder Challenge.
One round is all he needs. He takes the whole black out.
He's got another shot.
You should shoot it.
Wherever I
Good Lord.
I value my life. I don't need to shoot things like that.
Where on earth did this come from?
A friend of mine in St. Mary's, Idaho, built it. He's built a trapdoor Springfield, a carbine, a Maynard, a sharp suspenser, and then this thing.
And it's 1, 2, 3, is it 7?
Oh, you see my work here is done.
Like 7 groove or something?
Only I could use my powers for good instead of evil.
Say hello to my little friend.
Looks like an 18-pounder shell.
Holy.
But it's a Snyder and sort of all the detail then, eh? Yeah, wow.
Shiny.
Went with the Mark III version. God, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Lord Country, Jesus. First, you got to get it up to your shoulder.
I can't even reach the trigger.
That's what I was experimenting.
Where's your sight shot, Martin?
Yeah, right there's fine.
Boom.
This reminds me of that time that they shot a gun that they weren't too sure of the barrel or anything.
I know you're
Fired
putting
over there.
It's working, isn't
You
it?
guys aren't sure of anything.
Let's wear him out before he shoots. Let's paralyze his arm.
Oh, you're not going to shoot this one?
Not now, I'm what?
After.
Where'd it go?
It's a 7.55 Snyder.
I'm sorry, 5 what?
7.55 Snyder carbine.
Did you say 7.55?
7.55. It's a 12 gauge case loaded with a 900 grain bullet and 195 grains of single FG.
Anti-ship Snyder, is it?
I'm sorry?
An anti-ship Snyder?
Yes.
Good God, look at
Anti-aircraft
it.
It might be, but
And so we should see the hole from about British Columbia then, huh? Hoop!
One round, one hit, one kill.
And its functions just like any other Snyder, I guess, eh? I said it functions just like any other Snyder,
yes,
except for the
it's a Mark III.
excessive recoil. Wow.
Did you see it on the paper at all?
There's something in the black, but it's been shot at target before.
Is this the first time you shot it, Martin?
No, I fired it a couple of weeks ago, but only at 25 yards.
Yeah. Didn't even move.
I don't know where it's going. Can you see it at all?
No.
Hi, Darrell.
Sindhi, northwest India and southern Afghanistan. The tribe kind of crosses over the border there. And then it's got this old British antique import stamp that they quit using back in the late 50s or the 60s.
Okay.
Richard looked into it more. They still do it in England, but this was a really old stamp that they used to use, so I tried not to mess with it and leave it alone.
Of course, and it's just a sort of regular percussion lock?
Yeah.
It's using
Dolphin.
Was that number 11?
Yeah, 10. Number 10 is what I'm using. Yeah, because it is a tall, kind of weird nipple. He's kind of getting eaten out. I'd like to find a new one.
Right.
But the threads are very unique to it and everything. So.
God, that shape of the stock is. You find that. Well, look at the linkage between the trigger.
That is the thing, like bullpup almost. So you think this would be bad? You can try it. It is actually a very nice trigger.
Yeah, no,
very light.
Yeah.
I don't know how they figured that out, but they did. They did a good job of it.
Awesome. Well, sorry to let you get back to
right. Yeah, that's all right.
That's awesome. Thanks. Sorry, how many grains?
140.
140.
140 grains on
That's out of your measure there.
Yeah.
And then with, I see here, Richard's lube.
Yeah, utterly
And,
smooth.
a
And I
little
got
felt
these. Yeah, felt wads. Felt wad on the bottom, the ball, and then a felt wad on top with some lube. Yeah.
The wad sandwich, as it were.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that's all I'm doing.
Perfect. This is obviously your entry in the percussion smoothbore.
This is
match.
my entry.
Well, it's by far the most exotic entry, I think. That's awesome.
Thank you. All right.
So Darrell and Brett, you've come a long way here to this year's Alberta shoot, and you're obviously dressed in a degree of formality here. I was just curious of what that represents, and maybe you could say a few words about it.
We represent Her Majesty's 44th Regiment of Foot, and we're a live fire group that mixes live fire and living history, and we portray a particularly interesting era that doesn't get covered very much. We're post-Crimean War, so we portray about 1855 until about 1865. So we're in the era where we're, as Brett talks about in his book, the transition from smoothbore to rifled musket, and we portray the school of musketry as it was taught at Hythe in the 1850s and 60s. And we have various competitions we go to, but most importantly, we teach people about the adoption of the musket and the how important its impact was in military history.
So is this like a course that someone can sign up for and take?
We have courses where we reenact the School of Musketry that people are welcome to come to. We also have just regular free shoot days, and we attend a few competitions in Southern California, and we drive thousands of miles to come to shoots in the middle of Canada. So we do all kinds of things.
Well, we're certainly happy to have you. You're bringing all kinds of, well, obviously color for the first part, but lots of, obviously, knowledge and expertise. And I think in what you've indicated your interests to be, this is a great place to have those land. And we're so happy to have you come so far and share what you have brought to the table with us here. It's just great. It speaks to what the shoot's about, and a lot of people travel a long distance. And well, like I say, we're just really appreciative to have you guys out. Thanks for coming, and well, and bringing what you've brought in terms of your knowledge and your expertise, and well, and a P51. Great.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Darrell, and thank you, Brett. Whoa! Whoa!
Ach, guten Morgen, mein Herr.
Wow. Okay. We were not expecting this at the Alberta shoot. Not exactly definite enemies, but possible of the time.
Ach, nein.
Nein,
Wir
nein,
sind kein Feind.
Yes, we are
Wie
good
sagt man
friends.
in English, der Freunden?
Yeah,
Ja.
yeah.
Wir sind good friends.
So, Brett, what do we have here?
This is a model 1860 Dreyse Fusilier-Gewehr. So it's a short, light infantry rifle. The long rifle would have been several inches longer. So this is the light infantry skirmishing rifle. And it is the first bolt-action rifle ever adopted for military use. And the Prussians had them as early as 1841. This is an 1860 version. So at the time of the start of the American Civil War, where all those silly Americans are still shoving their bullets down the muzzles with sticks.
Well, and admittedly, a lot of the rest of the world is too.
Those Germans had a breech loader. This is colloquially known as the needle rifle,
Right.
because the firing pin is a needle that punctures through the powder charge to hit a primer that's at the base of the bullet. But it is a self-contained cartridge, obviously not a metallic cartridge, but it goes in the breech, you pull the trigger, and you open the breech and load it up again.
All right.
And I've managed to get it to go off about 50% of the time.
Okay. Well, this is going to be one of those.
I hope so.
So I noticed you had to use your finger to make sure it was presumably seated.
If I was using the service charge of 70 grains, it would stick out enough that I wouldn't have to shove it that far in. But I'm taking it easy on the old Prussian girl with about a 40 grain charge.
So it's just simply the length of the cartridge, right?
This is your only locking lug.
Okay, right. Yeah. So then the bolt handle is at that kind of crazy angle up in the air like that, eh?
Yeah. And that the bolt is your locking lug.
Right,
There's
right.
no other.
But it's hitting. I think I heard the
And that is cocked.
So you push it forward to
And you are
compress the
ready to go.
spring.
Jetzt.
Oh, well, just tough to see. What either crazy.
Gut.
Okay. And nothing left.
Thanks,
And
Bill.
that's it. Well, a little bit.
A little bit. Now, is that fairly typical? Just sort of.
Yeah, it's just ash, probably.
Now, is that paper
sable.
is that paper consumed on firing,
Most of it is.
or pulled out the barrel? So is it treated with anything?
No,
It isn't.
no, just straight up paper. Most of it just goes
With the
out
bullet.
the muzzle when it goes.
Right. Now the bullet, I understand anyway, is somewhat sub-caliber.
Yeah, the
contained
bullets.
in a sabot. Is that right?
Right. It's the Prussian, since this was adopted in 1841, and it was very modern for the time. But by the 1850s, You had modern rifle muskets like the Lorenz, the P-53 infield, with a much flatter trajectory and much longer effective range.
Right.
So the Prussians went from a
Darrell's
a
got an example here. for us.
rounder ball to this. This is a, they called it the Langblei, literally the long lead. And they fitted it in a sabot to increase the muzzle velocity and lower the trajectory.
Can you pull it apart again, Darrell? So it's got a sort of a swallowtail, like or not a tapered end to
Yes,
it.
that's to help it separate from the
Okay.
sabot. And it's not a very ballistically smartly shaped
Sound bullet, yeah.
but it was what they had to do as something of a stopgap measure to be able to compete against the modern rifle muskets with their higher velocity.
And what's that made out of? The sabot, I mean.
That's manila folder paper.
Really? So then it just, now I'm going to go out on a limb here, and it's been cut and then tapered.
Yes.
So when you roll it up, there's you'll have it come down and go straight.
Correct.
Okay, so it as you roll it up, then it creates that cone
Right.
that nests the bullet in. Okay.
And then the base has a little hollow for a
Oh,
musket cap.
which of course
the-
is what the needle's reaching for when it's
Right.
firing.
And the
right?
needle goes straight through the powder into the cap.
Wow. So then it's actually the sabot that's gripping the rifling on the way out.
Correct. The bullet does not, the actual lead bullet doesn't touch the
Those are quite beefy back sight there, isn't it?
Yeah, this was the long range, about 600 Schritt, German old archaic word, somewhat less than a yard, so about 550 yards. But this was the longest range of the sights. You can get an idea of the ballistics of the bullet by how high up that sight is for a fairly short, 550 yards.
Right.
That would be on a P-53 sight, like right around in here.
Sure. So in general speaking, the slower velocity, higher trajectory
Yes.
than a comparable rifle musket of the era.
It was inferior still, but it was better than the original rounder ball original. It was very inferior, like when the Prussians fought Austria in 1866. The Austrian Lorenz had about over 400 feet per second on it, a much flatter
Right.
trajectory. The danger space of the Lorenz rifle at 500 yards was the length of the Prussian needle rifle at 300 yards.
Well, okay.
But the Austrians just chose to fix bayonets and charge into the Prussian lines instead, so it didn't help them very much.
Right. Well, then what it's making up for in perhaps long-range ballistics, what's lacking in long-range ballistics, it's making up for in rapid fire, firing from cover.
And another unique aspect, you can load this from the prone just as fast as you can while standing,
Right,
which is
of
much
course.
more difficult to do with a muzzle loader. The Prussians also had leadership that had come up with new concepts that we would consider modern mission command style tactics, so that the lowest ranking German officers and NCOs were encouraged that when they saw initiative, they were to take it. It was the Auftragstaktik concept that later all militaries would generally come to accept. All the Austrians would stand and watch opportunities pass in front of them because they hadn't received any orders.
Now, is there any documentation in the training, maybe information of the day, in terms of shooting from the prone position, like tactical applications of that kind of stuff, or is it something that basically came around as a result of just on the ground understanding of how we could use this rifle now?
No, the Prussians, they appreciated the fact you could fire from the prone with the Dreyse. I don't think the training manuals emphasize it as much as the Prussian soldiers appreciated it.
Right.
In 1866, when they, on many occasions, did go to ground and opened up what they called Schnellfeuer, which is no commands, loading, firing on your own time as quickly as you can into the advancing forces.
Right. So this is a sort of a paradigm-changing firearm then, in terms of its breech loading
It was,
capabilities.
and then, yes, absolutely. And then the options and the capabilities that it gave commanders that you didn't have with the muzzleloader.
Mm-hmm.
A fairly small element of Prussian soldiers, a company-sized element did on several occasions defeat entire battalions of Austrians in 1866 just by taking the initiative and utilizing the higher rate of fire. The casualties at the main battle of the 1866 war at Königgrätz, it's 5-1 between the Austrians and Prussians. So it was about as much of a slaughter as you could get in modern war.
Wow. What's the muzzle velocity that you're shooting out of the reduced charge
These
here?
are
Do you know?
probably cooking along at about 800.
800. Okay.
Yeah, very, very mild.
Right. And how heavy was the bullet?
I'm not sure. It's not very heavy. It's about 400 grains.
Okay.
I think.
Right.
I don't know the exactly.
Right.
Yeah, but definitely lighter than a musket bullet.
Right.
Or a rifle musket bullet.
Huh. So this would have been for like the light infantry?
Yeah, for the fusiliers.
Yeah,
So
I'm not up on the Prussian terminology of their army, but the line infantry would have used an example that was just slightly longer.
Right. The line infantry, a couple more inches, not
Right.
very much longer, but in all other aspects was the same.
The same rifle, and they all had the sort of the scrollwork on the
Yes,
trigger
that's
guard.
a very European feature.
Right. Well, it's fantastic you're looking that out and give us a little background to it.
Oh,
It's
it is a lot
not
of
every
fun.
day you see a Dreyse, then especially fired by somebody in a blue tunic and a pickle hub.
Yeah, Wohlmann, yeah.
Fantastic. Manufacture of the ammunition then, is it okay, easy, hard,
Tedious.
yeah? So, but like because of all the parts?
It requires many more steps than just making a rifle musket cartridge, and the sabot is the hardest one. And they all have to be made fairly close in tolerances, because if the sabot is a couple millimeters too long or too short, you run the risk of either bending the firing pin needle or the firing pin won't reach the primer.
Right.
So it's got to be just right. And of course, the Prussians were stamping these out with machinery. I have to roll every one up by hand.
Now, were they historically with the sabots rolled as well?
They used a thinner, much longer roll that they would spin up, and then they would compress them down, almost like swaging them exactly into shape. So they came out in a very hard, tight, rolled paper sabot.
Right.
And worked fairly well, definitely well enough. It gave them that tactical edge that they needed by 1866.
Right.
It's an 1841 weapon system that in the rapidly changing 19th century they were still using 25 years later, and everyone else had latest and greatest small bore rifles.
Right. And
I think he hit it.
Made
something.
noise on that.
And look at the flaming sabot on the ground. There's the smoking sabot.
Oh, so it is, yeah.
For those of you interested in Victorian musketry, Brett's book, The Destroying Angel, is a must-read. It's available on Amazon at the link below. If you're in need of exceptionally high-quality and historic ammunition for your P53 Enfield, then stop by Brett's website, papercartridges.com. His work is of the highest quality, and his cartridges are the closest thing you'll find to an original anywhere. Once you've tried a properly made Enfield cartridge, there can be no other. For all your Snyder or Martini reloading needs, talk to Martin at X-Ring Services. If you'd like to support the channel, please stop by our Patreon page. The link is in the description below. And for more information on projects and updates between videos, follow us on our Facebook page.